Hello, this is Lromanosky from Calgary, Canada, and this is another installment of my video blog series on managing your vehicle life cycle, including the research that you go through before you purchase it, negotiating to buy the vehicle at a dealership, servicing the vehicle, and then finally disposing of it, okay, until it's time for your next one. In this video, I wanted to concentrate on one of the most important issues, which is purchasing the vehicle, and in particular, getting the best price and negotiating with your car dealer. And we know this is, if I read online, people have the most amount of questions about this topic, and it's also cause for the greatest amount of frustration with the car buying public. Okay, so let's get right into this topic. First of all, I think that it would make sense to view the automobile as a commodity in the same way as oil or pork bellies or orange juice or whatever it is. The price of a certain car goes up and it goes down dependent on the dealers and the dealer network's trading position on the car. Trading position is, I think, an old school term, but it basically means how you're managing your inventory and whether you have too much or too few of a certain car model. And in all manufacturers and all car dealers are going to have models that are hot sellers, that have recently been introduced, that have good reviews from the automotive journalists, good safety records from NCAP and IIHS. They may have good consumer reports reviews, etc. These vehicles just might, for whatever reason or reasons, just be very popular and be in very short supply. So every dealer has got, or we hope to have, at least some of their inventory that falls into that category. Or maybe they don't have any inventory at all if the vehicle is in especially high demand. Also, just about every dealer at every time is going to have models that are old in the tooth, that have been around for a while, where the demand isn't high, where they do have excess inventory and they are eager to get rid of them, okay? The manufacturers, when they tool up to build a car and they deal with the unions, and it's not that easy for them to change model lines midway. It's not that easy for them to respond month to month to differences in consumer demand. I mean, many years in advance, they have to do the planning to make a certain amount of models at a certain place. And the manufacturing industry is very sensitive to volume. So once you tool up and you build a factory and you set up your supply network, which is worldwide, and you deal with the unions and you staff your factories to produce a certain number of cars, well, you pretty much have to make that number of cars for the duration of the run. If you don't, the economies of the manufacturing facility will quickly turn sour. And so what that means is that the manufacturers then, at the beginning of the model year, would then agree with their dealer network as to how many of a certain car they're going to take, based on how many the factory is going to manufacture. They may not know the demand for the vehicle. They might not be able to predict the demand for the vehicle in 3 or 4 years' time. But out of necessity, they would make these agreements with the dealers. Okay, so then the dealers contract, basically, to take so many of these cars, whether they have an easy time selling them or whether they don't have an easy time selling them. Okay, they have no choice. They can't just pick the hot sellers and decline the ones that aren't selling that well. It just doesn't work that way. You have to take the good and the bad if you're a car dealer, and you don't have much choice in the matter. The trucks come and they give you your allocation, and you may not want half of it, but you have to take it anyway. Okay. With that, the dealers and the manufacturers work together to give incentives on the vehicles that are having trouble. For the hot sellers, They don't need any help at all. With the press they get and the internet reviews and so forth, the cars just sell by themselves. They don't even really need to be sold. People just come in and buy them. The salesman really doesn't have much work to do at all. Okay, but that might only be a small percentage, or if you're lucky and you've got a good franchise, the majority of your product, but it certainly wouldn't be all of it. For the rest of it, the car business goes on the incentive model. Okay, so when the dealer has too much of a certain product, and especially if all of the dealers in the network have the same problems, then the manufacturer will step up. And maybe you would have seen my earlier video about incentive interest rates for leasing and financing. Okay, that's one way you can incentivize a vehicle. And the manufacturer can have different rebates and so forth, and you'd be familiar with those for seeing the ads on the internet or on TV or in the newspaper. Okay, but then when it comes to the dealer, how much is the dealer willing to give up on a certain car? You know, the manufacturer might offer it at 1.9% interest rate or give a $4,000 cash back. They might offer one or the other. They might offer both. But the dealer would still have that markup. So let's talk about that. How much is that markup? How much is the dealer willing to give up? And how would a consumer know what a fair price for the car is? Okay. All right. So let's start with the markup on the cars. Okay, this does vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. Generally speaking, you know, if you're a Mercedes dealer or a Honda dealer or what have you, you get a set markup on your car. There might be other money that flows from the manufacturers to the dealers in terms of holdback, some other items. Support for marketing, etc. Generally, this isn't factored into the deal as the sales manager and the salesman see it. It goes straight into the accounting department, and it's really meant for marketing activities and to pay for the facility. Okay, so that can be several percent. It could be up to 5%, perhaps, maybe even more with some of the luxury makes. But generally, they would, in terms of what the sales manager and the salesmen or salespeople would have to negotiate with, is the standard markup on the car. For a volume dealer, this is less. Okay, not only is the cars less money, but the markup is less money. So if you are a Honda or a Hyundai or a Kia or a VW dealer, you know, this markup might be 5 or 6%. Okay, so if it was 5% and it was on a $20,000 car, well, that's 0.05 times 20,000. That's only $1,000 of room or markup that they might have. Okay, the luxury cars that the dealerships sell fewer cars, well, they need a higher margin to survive. When I was at Mercedes, it was 8%. I think it's dropped to 7% now that they have more product lines. This can go to 10% for some of the other luxury brands. And I think the ultra luxury, you know, Ferrari and Bentley and so on, might be in the 15 to 20% range. Okay, but they don't sell very many cars at all. All right. So that would mean on, let's say we have a $100,000 Mercedes, you would start with $7,000. If you had a $20,000 Honda or VW, it might be $1,000. Okay, that would be the range. That would probably encompass 95% of the cars sold today in Canada, a range like that. Like I said, there might be some extra manufacturing money at stake as well, so that could be added to it. You may know about that or not. Generally, the dealer will provide that information to you. Okay, they probably don't want to talk about their own markup on the cars, but if the manufacturer gives $5,000 or $10,000 on a car, they're generally they will tell you that. Okay, let's ignore that for a second, and then let's just stick with our markup between, say, $1,000 and $7,000 or $1,000 and $10,000 for just about all the cars that are sold in Canada today. All right, how much will the dealer give up, if any, and what should you try to negotiate for? Of course, now, this all falls in the realm of supply and demand. There are innumerable factors. Let me give you the example of one big dealer group in the GTA that has a new sort of innovative pricing model. And this is one where they price all the inventory every week or every 2 weeks. Not based on the invoice, but based on supply and demand. They price individual cars not only based on the year and the model and the variant of that model, but also on the color and also how long it's been in inventory. So this one dealer, if they had, let's just pick on Porsche here for an example. Let's say they had the midsize SUV is a Cayenne, and Cayenne's cost, let's just call it $100,000. Well, if they had 10 black ones in stock and they figured that 10 black ones was too many, they would reduce the price. If 9 people bought the black Cayenne at that price and they only had 1 black Cayenne left, they would raise the price. If they had a new allocation coming and there was 6 more Cayennes coming in that configuration, well, then they might lower the price. If that particular car was misordered somehow and it didn't have the options that most people wanted at the time, then they would lower the price. If for whatever reason it had only been in stock, like it had been in stock for 9 months, instead of the 2 months or 1 month, that would be ideal, then they would lower the price. So on the basis of the length of time the vehicle has been in inventory, type of vehicle it is, the color and the optional equipment of the car, and the interest generally in that specific VIN, it would generate its own price. And then that price would be posted on the vehicle. Actually, I don't think they're allowed to do that. The salesman would tell you the price of the vehicle, and the next week it could change. Now, what they're doing, and this company's FAF, by the way, and this information is on their website, PFAFF, in the Greater Toronto area. And so what they're doing is they're basically doing the same thing as just about every other car salesman and car sales manager and dealership does. They're just telling you the price ahead of time. Okay, so what's been common in the industry, there's some outliers like Tesla that don't do it this way, but what's common in just about every car dealership in the last 75 years is that these cars are priced based on all kinds of factors based on supply and demand. Okay, so in other words, these vehicles would be priced like any other commodity that you see on any of the stock exchanges. Okay, it would be the same thing. The demand varies, like electricity or fuel, goes up and down based on demand. I mean, I guess the one difference with the car business is that a cubic foot of natural gas or a barrel of oil will stay the same year to year, where the cars don't. And so with vehicles, you have the added complexity of model years. So you might and a model lifespan. So for instance, if the hot new car comes out in its first model year and it gets all the press and everybody wants this new car, well, the first cars are going to be, maybe they're going to be sold out, or at least the supply is going to be very low. Well, as it gets on, there's other new competitors that come up. The car is not brand new anymore. There's other cars out there with maybe the latest safety or infotainment features or performance or what have you. And then the car, maybe the inventories build up and the demand for the car subsides relative to the supply. Okay. Then as the car gets into the last part of its life cycle, well, now there's a new model coming out. I mean, often a manufacturer can start advertising a brand new model a year before it comes out, letting everybody know that the one on the dealer lots is going to be outdated in the near future. Okay, and with the changes in technology, I mean the powertrains don't change too much anymore, but there's a lot of changes with regard to connectivity and electronic safety systems and so forth. Okay, so when the car gets an advanced part of its life cycle, well, then the demand will drop again, okay? And so you might find that at the beginning of the life cycle, the price goes up. As you get to the end of the model year, the price goes down a little bit relative to MSRP. Then there's a new model year, and the price goes back up, and then it goes back down again as that model year fades out. And the peaks of this gradually decrease until the life cycle of the vehicle is over, okay? So in addition to these factors, the dealer also has to be concerned about the targets. And so just as the manufacturer needs to have a fairly even production volume month to month, and they need to plan for that in advance, make sure they have all the suppliers are in line and the parts that arrive just in time, just in place, that there is some regularity with output and so on. Well, then they need to make sure that the dealers sell the cars with the same regularity, and so they put in place monthly targets, which are very important for the manufacturer, and they make it important for the dealer. So in addition to, the other factors of supply and demand and product life cycle and time of the year and seasonality and et cetera, well, the dealers also have to be concerned about the targets. And so if they are behind on a certain model, and it's not just a global target for the number of cars, it's a target per model, then they can increase the incentives as the month or the quarter goes on. There's a little bit of truth to shopping for a car at the end of the month or the end of the quarter or the end of the year. It's probably not as big a factor as the general sense of supply and demand, but still, every month, if you're a car dealer, and every quarter, you have to be concerned about how many of each car you've sold. And the manufacturers like to send out press releases, saying that they, bettered the previous month last year by a certain amount every month. And they want to show steady growth month over month. And so the number of cars that a dealer registers every month and every quarter is important, because that gets fed into a larger picture that they send to the manufacturer. So as a consumer, well, how would you know any of this? How would you know the dealer's trading position? How would you know the supply and the demand? How would you know what a fair price is or isn't on the car that you're purchasing? The dealers live with these numbers and spreadsheets all day long, every day. You just come in to buy a car every 4 or 5 years. How would you know? There are some clues that will give you an indication, of course. I mean, if you go to the dealer and they've got a field full of a certain car in a certain color, you can probably conclude that they have a lot of inventory and they're probably pretty eager to sell it. And if you go in and ask for the car and they don't even have a demo because they're all sold out, well, that is another clue. The second thing, I think, is to look on the web. The dealers will generally have all of their inventory up there, and usually that's populated right from the manufacturer. So unless you're in the ultra luxury, Ferraris and so on, where they'll probably hide all their inventory and pretend they don't have any, just to have the illusion of scarcity. The manufacturers and the dealers will all have their inventory on the web. And so if you're looking at a particular car, I mean, you could go from the dealers in your city or the dealers across the country and get a fair idea of what's on the ground. The other clue is what kind of factories and incentives are out there. These will kick in when the dealers have too many cars, and so you can put it together pretty easily. A physical visit at the dealership showing that you can see piles of these cars, You go online and look at their inventory page, and maybe they've got 20 or 30 or 40 of the car that you're looking for. And you go to the manufacturer's website, and there's a very low interest rate that's an incentive rate and cash back, and you can get a pretty clear picture of how eager everybody is to sell these cars. If you go to the dealer and there's no stock, and you go to the dealer's websites across the country and there's very little there as well, and you go to look at the financing rates and there's no breaks there whatsoever, then you can conclude that, in fact, you can believe your salesman when he says that that these are a hot item and the dealers don't have any of them. Whether or not it's still a good buy is a subject for another video. If you get the maximum incentive, that could just be good timing. That could just be it's the exact car that fits your needs, and it's a good car, and it's highly rated. For whatever reason, there's just too many of them at that time, and at the point in your automotive life cycle where you're looking for a new car, it just happens to coincide with a good deal, because there's just, for whatever reason, too many of these cars on the ground at that moment. Well, then that's fantastic. You found the car that you want at a reduced price. Okay, so that's one scenario. The other scenario is that there's reasons nobody wants this car. It's a crappy car. It has outdated technology. It isn't safe. It isn't reliable. The build quality's, a mess. There's many other cars in the segment which offer better performance, better safety, better usability, etc. Nobody wants this particular car, and so it gets every incentive thrown at it, and it gets the low interest rate, and it gets the cash back, and the dealer's willing to give it away, etc., etc. That doesn't mean it's a good deal. It could just be a poor car, and you'll find that out when you go to sell it, and you'll find out that nobody wants it now, so you get a good deal. And when you go to sell it, nobody wants it then either, and it'll have low resale, and you'll find out that anything you think you've made on a deal up front in terms of an incentive, you've lost when it comes time to sell the car, and you could even lose a lot more than that. So it's a better idea to find the best car than chase the best deal. However, I hope that has given you some idea of the complexity of the supply demand as it relates to different cars at different times at different dealers, and why there is no one number that you can throw out there. It just doesn't work that way. Okay. And I'll conclude this video by saying that once you've negotiated on the purchase price of the car with the dealer, well, you're only halfway there, because now you are navigating through the F&I department, and we're looking at the dealer ads, whether it's all-season mats or trickle chargers or vinyl coatings for the front, or different protective coatings for the paint or the interior, or winter wheels, or extended warranties, and financing. So consumers are usually pretty good at figuring out the right car and doing the research. They're pretty good at negotiating with the car dealers to get a good price, and they're usually pretty terrible when it comes to the F&I and arranging their own financing and deciding on what things the dealer is going to put on the car. Okay, so that's the second half of the purchase. That's another video, and that'll be my next one. But I hope that sheds some light on dealer margins and supply and demand, and what you can expect from the dealer for the car that you're looking for. Thank you very much. Lawrence Romanosky from Calgary, Canada.